For 5 decades, this enigmatic man had run a $19 billion a year criminal empire without ever stepping foot in a prison cell. While other capos attract attention with their luxurious lifestyles, this man preferred to be in the shadows, building a network of corruption that reached the highest echelons of power. His true masterpiece, The Shadow, with only a handful of known photos, now captured in the hands of U.S. justice. His surrender in El Paso, Texas, marks the end of an era for the Sinaloa Cartel. This is the story of the man who changed the rules of the criminal game forever. What secrets will El Mayo Zambada reveal? In the rugged mountains of Sinaloa, in the folds of the Sierra, Ismael El Mayo Zambada Garcia was born on January 1st, 1948, on a small ranch known as El Alamo, south of Culiacan. His arrival, like much of his life, is shrouded in mystery, with no childhood photos or public records of his voice to attest to his early years. The young Ismael grew up in an environment where the line between legality and crime was as blurred as the horizon on a clear day. Sinaloa's rugged geography, with its deep canyons and hidden valleys, not only shaped the character of its inhabitants, but also provided the perfect setting for poppy and marijuana cultivation. While the Mexican government was proclaiming the nation's progress, the seeds of drug trafficking were sprouting in the Sinaloa highlands. Life as a peasant was hard, but the Zambada family, like so many others, managed to survive. However, young Ismael soon noticed that some of his neighbors seemed to prosper more than others. What was their secret? The drug business. But Ismael's fate would not be sealed until the 1970s, when the transition from peasant to drug grower presented itself as an irresistible opportunity. What led this young man to make the leap into the world of drug trafficking? The answer came in the form of an enigmatic character, Antonio Cruz, a former Cuban policeman who turned out to be his brother-in-law. Cruz had come to the United States fleeing Fidel Castro's regime, bringing with him not only the cunning of a cop, but also the contacts and knowledge of the criminal underworld. His first destination was Miami, where he quickly became involved in illicit activities. It was there that he extended an invitation to Ismael to visit him, a gesture that would become a turning point. For the first time, the young Sinaloan was able to see firsthand the opulence and power that drug trafficking could provide. The Miami skyscrapers, luxury cars, and ostentatious lifestyle were a stark contrast to the austere life Ismael knew in the mountains of Sinaloa. However, it was Cruz's subsequent move to Los Angeles that would mark the true beginning of his rise in the drug business. In the City of Angels, Cruz established himself as a respected heroin kingpin. It was here that Ismael truly learned the ropes of the trade, following in the footsteps of his mentor. Under Cruz's tutelage, Zambada moved from production to distribution, focusing on heroin as his first commodity in the drug trafficking world. The return to Mexico marked the beginning of Zambada's true criminal career. With the knowledge he acquired and an expanding network of contacts, Ismael demonstrated a natural gift for business and logistics. His ability to move in the shadows and his keen intelligence quickly set him apart from his peers. The rise of El Mayo Zambada began with his entry into the Guadalajara cartel. There, El Mayo came face to face with the first generation of Mexican kingpins, figures who would become legends of organized crime. El Mayo's relationship with Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, El Jefe de Jefes, was crucial to his development. Felix Gallardo, with his entrepreneurial vision of drug trafficking, became an unwitting mentor to El Mayo. By watching closely, Zambada learned the importance of organization, discipline, and strategic planning in the drug business. Along with Rafael Caro Quintero and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, El Mayo witnessed the unprecedented expansion of the marijuana and opium business. This experience gave him a deep understanding of the cartel's structure and operations on a grand scale. He saw how huge amounts of money were handled, how international trafficking routes were established, and how corruption infiltrated all levels of government. But perhaps the most valuable lesson El Mayo learned during this period was the importance of keeping a low profile. While his mentors attracted the attention of the authorities with their ostentatious lifestyle, Zambada opted to remain in the shadows. This strategy would become his trademark and the key to his longevity in the drug trafficking world. With the fall of the Guadalajara cartel, El Mayo made a crucial transition to the Juarez cartel. There, his collaboration with Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies, opened new horizons in drug trafficking. Carrillo Fuentes, known for his innovative use of airplanes to transport cocaine, introduced El Mayo to the world of large-scale air trafficking. This partnership dramatically expanded Zambada's knowledge of international logistics. He learned to coordinate complex operations involving multiple countries, modes of transportation, and distribution networks. In addition, he established crucial contacts with Colombian suppliers, inserting himself deeper into the global cocaine supply chain. It is rumored that during this period, El Mayo may have had indirect interactions with Pablo Escobar through Carrillo Fuentes. Although there is no concrete evidence of a direct encounter, Zambada may have absorbed lessons from the infamous Colombian capo. Throughout these experiences, El Mayo developed his own criminal philosophy. He adopted an entrepreneurial approach to drug trafficking, viewing the business not as a means to fame or personal power. It was February 7th, 1985, when an event shook the foundations of drug trafficking in Mexico. DEA agent Enrique Camarena was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered in Guadalajara. This brutal act unleashed a storm that would forever change the landscape of organized crime in the country. The response of the authorities was relentless. In a matter of months, the leaders of the powerful Guadalajara cartel fell one after another. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, Rafael Caro Quintero, and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, the bosses of bosses, were arrested. The empire they had built was crumbling, but ambitious new players would emerge from its ashes. Amid the rubble of the old order, El Mayo Zambada saw an opportunity. Years of discreet work and carefully cultivated connections had prepared him for this moment. But he was not alone in his ambitions. Two emerging figures, Joaquin El Chapo Guzmán and Juan José Esparragosa Moreno, were also looking to fill the power vacuum. How would these three men transform chaos into a new criminal order? The answer came in 1988, with the founding of the Sinaloa Cartel. This new organization broke with the centralized model of its predecessors. Instead, they adopted a horizontal, decentralized structure, designed to withstand the onslaught of the authorities and adapt quickly to an ever-changing market. El Mayo assumed the role of strategist and logistical coordinator. His ability to move in the shadows and weave a network of contacts proved invaluable. Under his guidance, the cartel expanded its control over key routes in Sinaloa, Sonora, and Baja California. But the real revolution was in the methods of trafficking. Subway tunnels that circumvented border surveillance, planes that flew through the sky loaded with cocaine, and even submarines that sailed under the radar of the authorities. The Sinaloa Cartel was not just transporting drugs, it was redefining the rules of the game. The organization diversified its portfolio from traditional marijuana and heroin to lucrative cocaine and dangerous methamphetamines. However, the rise of the Sinaloa Cartel was not without conflict. The breaking of the pact between El Mayo and the Arellano Felix brothers, leaders of the Tijuana Cartel, unleashed a bloody war. The murder of Armando Lopez, El Rayo de Sinaloa, a close friend of El Chapo, in 1989, was the spark that lit the fuse. El Mayo, in a decision that would define the course of the war, chose to support El Chapo in his quest for revenge. Compadres, partners, and at times rivals, these two men forged the Sinaloa Cartel into a global empire. The friendship between El Mayo and El Chapo went back decades when both were ambitious young men in the mountains of Sinaloa. This election triggered one of the most violent confrontations in the history of Mexican drug trafficking. Murders, kidnappings, and assassinations became commonplace in border cities. Media attention intensified, and the conflict threatened to destabilize the entire drug trafficking structure in Mexico. Where others saw chaos, El Mayo saw opportunity. Taking advantage of the intercartel war, the Sinaloa Cartel expanded its territory. They forged alliances with smaller criminal groups and developed an extensive network of political and police protection. The cartel's drug production and trafficking capacity skyrocketed, and its influence extended beyond Mexico's borders, reaching the United States and other countries. Amid this whirlwind of violence and ambition, El Mayo established a reputation as a strategic and discreet leader. While El Chapo sought the spotlight, El Mayo preferred the shadows, perfecting his low-profile strategy. He established his base of operations in the inaccessible mountains of Sinaloa, from where he ran an ever-growing empire. The contrast between the leadership styles of El Mayo and El Chapo could not be starker. It has even been said that on more than one occasion, El Mayo had to intervene to prevent El Chapo's extravagances from endangering the cartel. By the end of the decade, El Mayo Zambada had established himself as a formidable force in the drug trafficking world. His long-term vision. From his mountain base, El Mayo ran a logistical operation of staggering proportions. Subway tunnels, clandestine airstrips, and a fleet of submarines were part of his drug trafficking arsenal. But his true genius lay in his ability to weave a web of protection that stretched from the most remote villages to the corridors of power in Mexico City. The Sinaloa Cartel's international expansion under El Mayo's guidance was meteoric. Soon, the organization was operating in more than 50 countries, controlling trafficking routes that stretched from the Andes to the streets of New York. But El Mayo was not content with the traditional drug business. He diversified the cartel's operations, moving into arms trafficking, human trafficking, and even seemingly legitimate businesses. Financial management and money laundering became an art under El Mayo's supervision. Shell companies, real estate investments, and even government contracts were used to launder the millions that flowed in daily. It is estimated that the Sinaloa Cartel laundered as much as $19 billion a year, a sum that rivaled the GDP of some small nations. But El Mayo's true power lay in his ability to corrupt. His network of influence infiltrated all levels of Mexican government and security forces. Police, judges, politicians, and even top military commanders were on his payroll. The most notorious case was that of Genaro Garcia Luna, Mexico's former Secretary of Public Security, who allegedly received millions of dollars a month from the cartel. The million-dollar bribes were not just a tactic, but an integral strategy of El Mayo. He was rumored to have paid as much as $30 million on a single occasion to avoid capture. These payments not only brought protection, but also vital information about operations against him and the movements of his rivals. As El Mayo's power grew, so did the challenges. The drug war launched by President Felipe Calderón in 2006 put unprecedented pressure on the Sinaloa Cartel. But where other capos fell, El Mayo adapted. He used the violence unleashed by the war to eliminate weaker rivals and consolidate the cartel's control over key territories. El Mayo Zambada demonstrated time and again his ability to evade capture. On one occasion, according to intelligence reports, he managed to escape a military operation minutes before special forces raided his hideout. While El Chapo fell from grace, being captured and recaptured, El Mayo remained free, consolidating his position as the real power behind the Sinaloa Cartel. His influence extended beyond Mexico's borders, corrupting officials in Central America and, according to some reports, even the United States. By the end of this era, El Mayo Zambada had become an almost mythological figure, never photographed, rarely seen, but ever present in the shadows of power. His ability to operate with impunity defied logic and frustrated security agencies on both sides of the border. As El Mayo navigated the turbulent waters of the changing world of drug trafficking, a new generation was emerging in the heart of Sinaloa. Zambada's sons, raised in the heart of Mexico's most powerful criminal empire, were preparing to take on crucial roles in the organization. Vicente Zambada Niebla, known as El Vicentillo, was the crown jewel. The eldest son of El Mayo, Vicente quickly rose through the ranks of the Sinaloa Cartel, becoming a key operator in the international cocaine trade. His intelligence and charisma positioned him as the heir apparent to his father's empire. However, fate had other plans. On March 18, 2009, El Vicentillo was captured by the Mexican army in a surprise operation in Mexico City. What followed shocked the drug trafficking world. Vicente decided to collaborate with U.S. authorities. The prodigal son of Mayo Zambada became a witness against the Sinaloa Cartel, revealing secrets that would shake the foundations of the cartel. But El Mayo had not put all his eggs in one basket. Other sons like Ismael Zambada Imperial, El Mayito Gordo, and Serafín Zambada Ortiz, El Flaco, also played crucial roles in the family business. El Mayito Gordo, known for his extravagant lifestyle and wild parties, managed key cartel operations. El Flaco, meanwhile, specialized in cross-border trafficking. The fall of El Vicentillo left a vacuum in the cartel structure that needed to be filled. How would El Mayo respond to this family betrayal? As the Zambada family grappled with its own internal dramas, the cartel's armed wing evolved. The Anthrax, an elite group of hitmen, emerged as the Sinaloa Cartel's lethal force. Led by José Rodrigo Arechiga Gamboa, alias El Chino Anthrax, this group became the terror of the cartel's rivals and a headache for the authorities. El Chino Anthrax was no ordinary hitman. With his social media presence and ostentatious lifestyle, he became something of an underworld celebrity. His Instagram posts, showing off gold-plated weapons and luxury cars, contrasted sharply with the low profile maintained by El Mayo. But behind the glamorous facade was a ruthless killer and brilliant strategist. Other key operators such as Manuel Torres Felix, LM1, also played crucial roles in expanding and consolidating the cartel's power. M1, known for his brutality, was El Mayo's right-hand man on the ground, in charge of eliminating rivals and maintaining order in the cartel's territories. As El Mayo aged, the question of succession became increasingly pressing. With Vicente out of the game and other sons facing their own legal problems, who would take the reins of Mexico's most powerful criminal empire? El Mayo, always thinking long-term, had been grooming his heirs for years. But the drug trafficking business is unforgiving, and the challenges of maintaining control were enormous. New cartels were emerging, more violent and less tied to the old rules of the game. Pressure from the authorities was mounting, and infighting threatened to tear the cartel apart from within. In the midst of this chaos, rumors of a possible heir emerged. This was none other than Ismael Zambada Siqueiros, alias El Mayito Flaco, the most discreet of El Mayo's sons, who began to be mentioned in drug trafficking circles as the true successor. In 2001, when Guzmán escaped from the Puente Grande prison in a laundry cart, it was El Mayo who orchestrated his triumphant return to the business. And in 2015, when El Chapo escaped through a tunnel, it was again El Mayo who was behind it, providing resources and protection. As El Mayo navigated the complexities of his relationship with El Chapo, Mexico's drug trafficking landscape became increasingly violent. The Zetas, former special forces turned hitmen, unleashed an unprecedented wave of violence. The war against Los Zetas was brutal and bloody. El Mayo deployed his entire arsenal, from hitmen to bowed politicians to contain the threat. Zambada's strategy, which combined brute force with political savvy, ultimately prevailed, but at an enormous cost in lives and resources. Simultaneously, old rivalries resurfaced. The Juarez cartel, once an ally, became a mortal enemy. The border city of Ciudad Juarez was transformed into a battlefield, with thousands dead. El Mayo, from the shadows, directed the war, moving pieces on a blood-stained chessboard. But the most recent, and perhaps the most dangerous threat, came from the south. The Jalisco Cartel, New Generation, CJNG, led by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, emerged as a new power in Mexican drug trafficking. With even more violent tactics and unbridled ambition, the CJNG began to challenge the Sinaloa Cartel's dominance in its own territories. The panorama was further complicated by the final capture of El Chapo in 2016 and his subsequent extradition to the United States. The power vacuum threatened to destabilize the Sinaloa Cartel from within. El Chapo's sons, known as Los Chapitos, were reclaiming their place in the cartel's hierarchy. El Mayo found himself in a delicate position. On the one hand, he had to maintain cartel unity. On the other, he could not allow the inexperienced and often reckless Chapitos to jeopardize decades of careful work. Tension between the old guard, loyal to El Mayo, and the new generation, led by Los Chapitos, threatened to explode into internecine warfare. In June 2020, this tension came to a head. The murder of a key El Mayo operator, known as El Ruso, was attributed to Los Chapitos. The message left on the body was clear. The internal war had begun. How to keep Mexico's most powerful cartel together in the face of internal and external threats. Internally, Zambada adopted a divide-and-conquer approach with Los Chapitos. Taking advantage of rivalries between El Chapo's sons, he managed to isolate the most problematic elements while forging alliances with others. Simultaneously, he reinforced his own power base. The legacy of this invisible narco had deeply permeated Mexican society, leaving an indelible mark on the country's culture, economy, and social fabric. In Sinaloa, narco culture flourished like never before. Corridos narrating the exploits of El Mayo and other capos echoed through the streets, while television series and movies glorified the drug trafficker's life. But Zambada's impact went beyond the cultural. In Sinaloa, the economy had become intertwined with drug trafficking. Seemingly legitimate businesses flourished, fueled by cartel money. However, this prosperity came at a devastating cost. The violence associated with drug trafficking had left thousands dead and disappeared, tearing the social fabric of entire communities. Meanwhile, the hunt for El Mayo continued unabated. Spectacular operations ended in frustrating failures, with the kingpin always one step ahead of the authorities. Rewards for his capture reached astronomical figures, with as much as $15 million offered by the US government. But El Mayo remained a ghost, fueling ever more elaborate theories about his whereabouts and his methods of evading justice. The business model developed by El Mayo over decades had revolutionized drug trafficking. His entrepreneurial approach, his preference for negotiation over violence, and his ability to adapt to an ever-changing landscape had laid the groundwork for a new era in organized crime. But with new cartels emerging and the dynamics of the drug trade evolving rapidly, the legacy of Ismael El Mayo Zambada raised uncomfortable questions about the future of the country. Had the invisible narco left such a deep mark that it would be impossible to erase? Or would his eventual fall mark the beginning of the end for cartel dominance in Mexico? In the mountains of Sinaloa, where it all began, it seemed to carry a clear message. The story of El Mayo Zambada is far from over. And with each unexpected twist, with each new challenge, the world kept asking, what would be the criminal chess master's next move?